Hello, and welcome to this video on Oregon OSHA's temporary administrative rule addressing COVID-19 in labor, housing, and agriculture. Before we dive in, there's a few things you should know. First off, COVID-19 is an illness caused by a virus that can spread from person to person. It's currently a public health crisis throughout the country and the world. Symptoms can range from mild or no symptoms to severe illness and even death. You can become infected by coming into close contact about 6 feet or 2 arm lengths with a person who has COVID-19 when they cough, sneeze, or talk. That's not all. You can also get it by touching a surface or object that has the virus on it, and then by touching your mouth, nose, or eyes. To help reduce worker exposure to COVID-19, Oregon OSHA was asked to develop a rule addressing this public health emergency in labor, housing, and agriculture. This rule took effect on May 11th. Since this is a temporary rule, it will remain in effect until repealed, but not any later than October 24th of 2020. Okay, so what exactly is this rule? This temporary rule addresses the COVID-19 emergency by strengthening requirements in 3 areas: field sanitation, labor housing, and transportation. Who is affected by this rule? This rule applies to all labor-intensive agricultural operations and all employer-provided housing. So, what's labor-intensive agricultural operations? This is an agricultural workplace where employees do hand labor operations in the field or labor-intensive activities. In other words, there are a lot of workers involved. There are certain exceptions though, and we strongly encourage you to study the rule for yourself since we can't cover every detail in this video. Go to osha.oregon.gov and click on COVID-19 resources. This video is important for both employers and workers. As an employer, it is your responsibility to assure that your workers, facilities, and equipment comply with this rule. Also, you must provide and cover the costs associated with following the rule. As a worker, it's valuable to know your rights and what rules your employer is required to follow. We'll discuss 3 key sections found in the temporary rule, beginning with field sanitation. This temporary rule requires employers to appoint 1 or more social distancing officers. These officers will ensure the appropriate social distancing as well as the sanitation measures are implemented. Let's go into that a bit more. Appropriate social distancing means there is at least 6 feet or about 2 meters of separation between workers. To make this happen, employers must plan and implement work activities so that workers will be 6 feet or more from each other as they perform their duties, during breaks, or during meal periods. In the event that the employer determines and can demonstrate that it is impossible to structure work activities to avoid such contact, contact within 6 feet must be minimized and the employer must implement appropriate additional sanitation and protective measures. This will include the use of cloth face coverings by the affected employees. Another significant change that will take place effective June 1, 2020 is the availability of portable toilets and hand washing stations in the fields. This new rule will reduce the ratio of facilities in the field from the current 1 per 20 workers to 1 per 10 workers. Employers will need to comply with the rule by providing 1 toilet and 1 hand washing station for every 10 employees. What about location? First thing, your toilets and hand washing facilities have to be next to each other for obvious reasons. Second, these facilities must be located at either the entrance or exit to the field or in a previously harvested area, whichever is closer to the workers. Whatever option you go with, just remember that it's got to be less than a 5-minute walk or a quarter of a mile from the workers. As I'm sure you know, the toilets and hand washing facilities are required to work, be clean, and safe. Ensure they are sanitized at least 3 times daily to make sure that the facilities are kept clean to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. To make sure workers understand these requirements, employers are required to use the revised poster and post the field sanitation notice explaining these requirements, including a section about the prevention and risk of the COVID-19 and advising where workers may file complaints regarding field sanitation matters. The notice must be in the language of the majority of the workers. Before we wrap up this section on field sanitation, I want to mention the importance of providing cool, clean drinking water to workers. It's the law and the right thing to do. Please take a moment to refresh your memory on the requirements for water in the rule. Now we're on to labor housing. In this section, we'll talk about the requirements for labor housing. These rules apply where there is housing provided by a farmer, farm labor contractor, agricultural employer, or other person in connection with the recruitment of workers on an agricultural establishment. These rules also apply to any such housing provided by an employer or other person in connection with the employment of workers in any non-agricultural business activity. Let's get down to business. While this doesn't cover the entire rule, here's the key takeaways. You need to appoint a social distancing officer. No, this isn't a law enforcement officer. We're talking about a person or persons that the employer has identified who will be responsible for planning social distancing and sanitation procedures. The social distancing officer will be making sure the required measures in the rule are implemented. You might be wondering, what is social distancing in this context? Essentially, housing operations must be arranged in such a way that unrelated workers will not need to be closer than 6 feet to each other or about 2 meters. What about toilets? Same as the field sanitation section, starting June 1st, 2020, you'll need 1 toilet for every 10 workers, so 20 workers will require 2 toilets. You get the picture. Let's talk about cleaning. Common use toilets, hand washing facilities, water spigots, and handles, and other high-contact commonly used items must be sanitized as needed, but no less than twice a day. However, portable toilets must be sanitized at least 3 times a day, and if there's employees assigned to do this, it needs to count as work time. Also, the employer must supply appropriate cleaning materials at no cost so that the employees can keep their private living areas clean and sanitary. So what about sleeping quarters? There's a few requirements to keep in mind. First off, bunk beds with unrelated people are not allowed, and beds must be separated by at least 6 feet or a non-permeable barrier. Examples of non-permeable barriers include materials like plexiglass, heavy plastic, or lightweight wood sheeting. The last thing to talk about in this section is what to do if an employee is confirmed or suspected of having COVID-19. First thing, you need to report it immediately, following the rules of the Oregon Health Authority, or OHA. There are requirements regarding how you identify and isolate sick occupants. This is divided into 2 categories: suspected cases and confirmed cases. Each are isolated in separate housing. In both of these situations, the sick people need to be isolated from others. In addition, these people, whether suspected or confirmed, must be provided with sleeping, eating, and bathroom accommodations that are separate from other people, except family members. Someone in the household must be designated to take care of the sick individual, and the camp operator must ensure that isolated people are provided with food and water. And now for the final chapter in this book. Transportation. In this section, we'll discuss the requirements for employer-provided transportation. What transportation are we talking about? So when employers are providing transportation to farm workers to and from the workplace, or moving workers between workplaces, they must ensure that the following disease prevention measures are implemented. So I've got 4 key points for you about transportation. Number 1. The vehicle operator, as well as all passengers, must be separated by at least 3 feet or 1 meter during the commute time. If the vehicle seats don't allow for this separation, then you can't use them, regardless of the vehicle's normal capacity. Number 2, all occupants in the vehicle must wear cloth facial masks that cover their nose and mouth. This includes the driver as well. Number 3. All high-contact surfaces like door handles, seatbelt buckles, armrests, steering wheel, etc. must be sanitized before each trip or at least twice each day when the vehicle is used continuously. Number 4. It's the employer's responsibility to inform and train all employees about the risks presented by close contact with individuals outside their household and to ensure appropriate social distancing when in their personal vehicles or vehicles provided by the employer. We've covered a lot of information in this video. You probably have questions and we're glad to help. One of the best places to find information is at osha.oregon.gov. We've got a variety of helpful resources available for you. Things like fact sheets, Q&As, and most importantly, you can download a copy of the temporary rule. Please keep in mind that this video is just a basic overview of the requirements and should not be used as a replacement for reading the rule for yourself. And finally, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Our phone number is 503-378-3272. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about safety and health.